This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing, and brought to you this week by Page Cooperative, the printing industry's largest printing cooperative. If your newspaper or printing company is looking to save money on newsprint, ink, printing plates, and more, contact Page Cooperative today. Learn more about Page Plus pricing at pagecooperative.com or contact directly CEO Gary Blakely at 800-468-9568. That's 800-468-9568, extension 196. Page Cooperative, the printing industry's largest printing cooperative. And hello once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. And if I were to say to you News Media Corporation, would you know who I'm talking about? Some of you do, and some of you don't, because John C. Tompkins, the CEO and owner of this company that has 65 different newspapers in 8 different states, and mostly small markets, populations of 5,000 to 50,000, John tends to stay under the radar. We don't see him on a lot of stages at conferences, and we don't see him getting interviewed a lot in trade magazines, which is most probably why I wanted to get him on E&P Reports, because there are a lot of people that want to work for this company. These publishers are successful. These small market newspapers are profitable. And John, who was a college dropout, who bought his first newspaper as a junior in college, and he had to drop out to build his empire, has some very, very good tenets on how to run an effective local newspaper property. Good or bad, right or wrong, it's working for News Media Corporation. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this company that doesn't get a lot of buzz, but is doing quite well, even in a COVID-19 world, then stick around for the next 35 minutes as I go one-on-one with John C. Tompkins of the News Media Corporation. Hey, John, welcome to E&P Reports. It's an honor to have you part of our program today. And I want to let you know that I did a lot of looking for information about you on the internet. I was looking for any interviews you've granted. I was looking for biographies, who is John Tompkins? Something, there isn't a lot out there about you. You fly a little bit under the radar, don't you, sir?
Good.
You want it that way, don't you?
Pretty much, yes.
I mean, there's an interview 5 years old from Inland Press. I got some, from 11 years old from Inland Press that I found, and not much else. But I want to say that you're definitely an industry, how should I put this? An industry supporter. You started back in '75, did you not, sir? Your father was big in the industry, and you got the ink in your vein bug, I assume, from Dad. Is that how that all got started?
Yes, it is. My dad was from Western Canada, then moved to the United States after the war, and he got in business with Bob Howard
Right.
Publication, and he always ran their largest paper. And I started out on the Hammond, Indiana paper as a paper boy. And eventually worked myself into the dispatch department and then circulation as a district manager and then advertising. And while I was going to school and all that sort of thing.
Where did you study, by the way? Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Calvin College and Purdue University.
Okay.
But I'm a college dropout. I bought my first papers when I was a junior in college.
Right.
And I'd taken all my business courses, and my dad was so mad at me. He said, "You better go out there and run those you-know-what things."
So I was 75. You were a junior in college, and what was the first paper you bought, sir?
There were 3 papers out of Rochelle, Illinois, which is about 70 miles west of Chicago, 25 miles south of Rockford, Illinois. Frankly, I didn't know there was anything out there because I grew up in the Chicago area. And so I happened upon those through a radio broker who had sold the owner's radio station. So I really wanted to buy some in California, but that I probably didn't.
And did you put the deal together yourself? Did you get any help? How did you get the financing at a young age like that?
I've always been a big reader. I read about 5 hours a day. So I studied in the college library how to put corporations together, financing, things like that. And so what I did was I had 2 or 3 guys that I worked with at the Hamlet paper. They threw in some money. I convinced my dad through his third wife to throw in some money. And my mother, yes. And I did something called a sub-S corporation. But back then, you could offset your investment with the tax loss one-on-one, not like today. And so finance has always been a hobby of mine. And then regarding it was a cash deal. So I learned how to borrow from the local bank, or any bank for that matter, and went ahead and got done that way.
And so now we're back in 1975. Obviously, the internet's not even a gleam in anyone's eye. You're taking over small market. These were weeklies, I assume, that you took over in those days, or what?
One twin weekly, so which was semi-weekly, and then one other weekly in a plan.
And then how long was it before you picked up another newspaper? How long did you struggle with that one, or get yourself involved before you started expanding?
Well, when I bought it, it was losing about $44,000 a year, and I didn't have much cash. And in fact, I didn't have enough cash. And I had a 10-year note, so I turned that around in 4 years, less than 4 years, actually about a year, and paid the note off in 4 years. That's what I was trying to say. So right after that, I got hooked up with First National Bank of Chicago, their media division. And I bought my first small daily in Central Illinois, and I had a deal to buy another weekly in Illinois that fell through. So about 4 or 5 years.
All right, so now you're here late 70s. We're talking that was a down economy, right? So you're buying
every 10 years, Mike, down economy.
Yeah. I know. What was it? When people are fearful, be greedy. When people are greedy, be fearful. The famous Warren Buffett. So you're buying in a tough economy, likely a good move. So here you are, young kid, scrapping on your own. You turned. See, I want to take you back in time before we talk about today. What was your ethic? What was your philosophy? What was it that turned it around? Were you just good at seeing wasted expense? Were you good at motivating people? What did you do when you took over this newspaper that make it take a loser that was losing $44K and turn it into a profitable machine?
Well, the composing room, back in those days, you could make some money getting the composing room in order. So I laid off some people in the composing room. I put in some ad promotions right away. Beefed up the sales department and raised the rates. And the combination got me in the black almost immediately, and went on from there. And I was learning during that time period the small newspaper business. This was something new to me. Plus, managing older people was something new to me.
Oh yeah, and you talked about sales. Did you hit the street yourself? Were you out there making deals?
I not only hit the street selling advertising, but collecting money. And I learned this from a retail chain store manager. He was on the floor of the store one day, and I said, why aren't you up in your office? He said, my customers are on the floor, so I'm going where they are. He had a big store, and I thought, well, why can't we do that? So.
No journalism background at college.
No.
You didn't worry about dotting I's, crossing T's, and that kind of stuff. You let the editorial team do their job.
Honestly, Mike, my theory was you can teach a businessman to write, but you can't teach a writer to be a businessman very often. And what I saw when I got into business was a lot of neglect back in those days. Business was easy. There were problems with it, but still the people I knew didn't work that hard. And I thought, well, I can work harder than this. I can do what they're doing. And when you're that age, you don't know how much trouble you can get into, and you just plow ahead.
All right, so you're now in the late 70s. You're putting together deals, and was this a massive like hockey stick growth for you through the 70s and 80s? Because now you're sitting on a lot of properties, but how long did it take to get? What was your trajectory? How did you keep adding newspapers to your empire?
We would go in clumps. We would go a year or two not adding a paper or two, and then we would add 1 or 2 after that, or 3. And then we back off for a year or 2 and then do it again. And we broke out of Illinois in, I want to say 1987. We bought a group in Torrington, Wyoming. And our company was always what I call a bank company. We figured out what the banks wanted, and we back engineered the company to make sure we not just made our payments, but kept our covenants and all that sort of thing. So really, the more we bought, the better we looked. But we had to do it carefully.
All right. So, and then comes the 90s, and you continue your growth. Now you've got what, 150 plus publications. You're in 9
we
states.
had 71. We're at 71 right now. Titles.
Okay, 71 publications.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I was looking at your website. It says 150 plus. I'm assuming.
Just bought something the last week. So.
All right. And you're in 9 separate states.
Yes.
And what is the company formula? I mean, there must be some magic formula for being part of News Media Corporation. It's not just a conglomeration of, because we have one common odor. If I was to join your company, what culture would I be part of? What would I be feeling?
You could be part of what we call die on your hill. And that means you're going to get the job done. We're going to get the job done. We're going to help you. We're going to train you the different ways to operate different departments. And since we probably know more than you do, you'll learn what we know, operate in it, and then you start coming up with your own ideas. And then the rest of us will do those ideas across the country. So it's a very much a formula-driven business, or company, my company. And the theory is knowledge plus pressure equals results. But the real deal is I could not tolerate, and I saw this in the bigger, older newspaper companies when I was growing up, pride in, well, it wasn't invented here, and so we're not going to do it. So we have a lot of euphemisms in our company. If we caught a man or a woman publisher arguing based on pride, we would do what we call take a ball bet to him or her, which means you're going to do it. You're going to learn our way first, and then we're going to learn from you. All of us. And if this is a better way, one of the things I did, I went around when I was, just in the late 70s, early 80s, and I learned from the very best around the country. So-and-so had the very best way of running a newsroom. So-and-so had the very best way of running a composing room. I went to those properties and I asked for time with that publisher, that owner. And I'd take it legal pad, and when he or she would tell me something, I'd write it down. I'd just say, I tell them, well, I'm going to do that. And so our company is eclectic. It was put together from different other companies that are really good in one area, 2 areas, but not so good in the rest of the areas. So that's why I had no pride when I did this, because I didn't know what I was doing, frankly. And I wanted a really good result, but I wanted it consistent and uniform over a number of papers across the country. I didn't want to have some publisher just inventing something and then, doesn't work. And we're not going to get Harvard graduates in towns of 5,000 to 10,000. I
hear you on that one. So basically, you've kind of aggregated best practices.
Yes, sir. That's the right way to put it.
That you went around and said, that is the way to run a newsroom. That is the way to do circulation. That is the way to do digital. That is the way to build audience, what have you. And those will change in time. If you find a better practice, you replace it.
Yes.
How large is the corporate supporting staff? I mean, is there like 20 of you running around to all these properties, or
no,
how big is corporate?
Well, from the beginning, I always overstaffed corporate because I knew I was going to lose a few.
Okay.
And I figured investing in people and teaching them these ways of doing things would really help. And sure enough, I lost a few over time, but really we did this to train our publishers. We really never lose a publisher unless things aren't working out for him. And so back then we were training publishers from scratch. And we used to have a joke that could we get somebody from a trailer park, meaning no business experience at all, and could he or she run a 30% margin under our system? And it did happen. We had one of those. And it's,
really?
And she's a very successful publisher, I think, for Gatehouse right now, or Gannett. And by the way, Mike, we have a lot of euphemisms in our company. One is, this is the architectural way of running newspapers. If you went to build a house and you said to the contractor, here's kind of what I want verbally, and let them do what they want to do, I guarantee you're going to end up with a house not what you wanted. But if you lay it out on paper, the best practices, for this is the family room I want, this is the kitchen, etc., follow the plan. You're probably going to get pretty close to a good house, but certainly what you wanted. And frankly, nobody would build a house the other way, if you know what I mean.
So the NMC model, in your opinion, is the best. I mean, but it's and I don't want you to reveal everything because we only have a short time together. But if you could, I'm going to put you on a little bit of almost like a speed dating here. I'm going to name one department, and if you could give me what the NMC best practice would be. Like if I were to say newsroom, and across your entire different, because these are mostly small markets that you're handling, what would be the number one tenet that you would say is an NMC best practice for the newsroom?
The newsroom has to be productive. It has to, each reporter and editor must produce a certain amount of names and stories every issue, every week, period. That's the real deal there. And we have ratios to measure all these things.
So you basically do believe in some form of measurement. I mean,
we have measurement for everything.
Everything.
Yes.
If you can't measure,
you're going to kick out this. The accounting department, the corporate accounting department, avoided measurements for themselves.
So the numbers guys don't run numbers, but everybody else does. So you're a believer. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. In other words, everything boils down to a number. So rather than getting all high, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but rather than stay up in this ethereal world, you believe in your heart of hearts, if story count is high, you got a pretty good chance of generating a lot of local content. You'd rather look at that metric. And so I got to agree with you. My background was radio and TV before I got into the newspaper industry. And I managed a small market radio station, news staff of 4, because you remember full service radio in the good old days where you had, I was the morning man, and we held, each of my reporters had to do 6 stories a day. When I went into a TV station, we sent out a reporter and a shooter that came back with 1 a day. It used to drive me crazy, all this money. So you're looking for high story count, and then they're generating good local news.
Per FTE.
Right.
And including the editor. All our editors are working editors. I think it's interesting. Mike Reed ran into this in particular when he bought Columbus, Ohio. I remember him saying that he had some reporters in there that only did 1 or 2 stories every 2 or 3 weeks, and of course they were the highest paid. And he learned that issue is really, and he was public about this. Issue is really productivity per newsroom employee. And that's what it's all about, nothing else. And
so, you're not as upset about a grammatical error in the paper as you are about a lazy reporter. You want them out there hustling. All right, let's move on then to circulation. I mean, I'm assuming you want to sell those darn puppies. What is the #1 tenet in NMC for the Circ department?
That we measure profit per subscriber. And we put in. I learned this from a lot of our accounting is from Thompson newspapers, by the way. They were the very best at accounting, by the way. But they put white paper costs into the accounting department, or circulation department expenses. So, and we have smaller papers. So every time we sell a subscription, the revenue from the subscription is less expenses, including distribution. There's a huge profit margin in there. So we push that, and we push renewals. But we have, like I say, the main thing is profit per subscription or profit of the circulation department. In some cases, in some of our papers, that is the profit of the paper.
Wow. You rely that heavily in circulation revenue as a profit center. Okay, cool. Let's go into sales. I mean, obviously metrics there. What are you looking at?
Well, you were in the radio business. It's very interesting. When I got started in Rochelle, when I came in, there were 4 grocery stores, and it got down to 1 almost overnight. Another department store went out of business, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, I learned that best practices. I learned that Hagedorn Corporation, who have their own radio stations, that they had adapted the radio model of promotions to the newspaper business. So I went over and hired, with Hagedorn's permission, one of their ad directors, classified ad directors from the town next door. I had lost 30,000 inches from these things the first year. Or, at that time, he came in and replaced 30,000 inches the first year with promotions. He did it again the next year, 60,000 inches. And I knew we were onto something. And then I read a speech by Mr. Boone where he talked about losing the bigger businesses, even back in the 70s, and replacing them with smaller non-retail sales tax businesses. But the promotions give them a reason and a vehicle, which I'm sure you did this in radio.
Oh, yeah.
Reason to advertise, and they don't want to think about advertising. They want to run their business. And so the thing with us is papers must run, depending on their size, X amount of dollars in promotions off the promotion calendar each month, or else they have to do it.
So you're basically not just relying on selling ad space. You're really trying to push the entire promotional ethic of the paper into the business community. So it's always exciting, something new every month, something happening. Yes. How about sales training? Do you have it standardized at the company? Is there some?
We have our own way of doing that. We have 2 sales meetings a day, one in the morning, one in the evening, at every paper. And
really?
So we keep them short. The people set their goals based on, they set their own goals, but it's somewhat based on the projection or, what we're aiming for. And at the end of the day, and they have to have prospect lists and all the rest and say what they're going to sell and to who. At the end of the day, we come back quarter to 5, whatever, and report what the results are, and we use it as an opportunity to cheerlead and to pat them on the back and kind of ignore the failures. But in telemarketing, we have 3 sales meetings a day because sometimes those promotions you're selling in the morning aren't working out. And that's a hard thing to do anyway, telemarketing, advertising. So we'll switch it, the noon meeting, put some different ones in, new ones in. When we buy a property, we have 3 sales meetings a day. That's our training for the new salespeople we inherited when we acquire paper. Excellent. And the publisher, by the way, also.
What about a comp plan? Is it just basically on dollars, or are you into the carrot and stick model? How do you comp your salespeople normally?
Percentage of dollars, and generally speaking, the more dollars, the higher the percentage. And we measure advertising cost percentage of receipts. If they are 10% or below, we're, cost to revenue, we're way below what we should be doing selling the market. If we're 20% or more, we're in trouble. And so what gets you up to 20% of your telemarketers, who we pay up to 20% of sales.
Of course.
But the sales on the street sales associates, they can go up in their percentages. So, I have some publishers that are really good at cost, but they want to try to hold the same sales level. And I'll look at the ratios and see right away they're at 10, 11%. And what do you know, that they don't have the right number of salespeople, that sort of thing. So yes, we want our salespeople to make as much as they can, maybe more than the publisher even. Who, by the way, in our model, every publisher carries a good sized load of accounts. We have no ad managers to speak of. We have maybe one ad manager in one property where the manager of the property, the publisher, is out around the country doing some other things.
So when you're looking for a publisher, you're looking for someone who can sell. You're looking for someone from the business side of the business, as opposed from the editorial side.
But we have some that came from the editorial side that learned to sell, and not many, but a few. They're very smart, and usually they have a different background. Maybe they were a bartender before they got the newsroom, that sort of thing. They have some real life experience.
I found it fascinating, John. I mean, I know I'm interviewing you, but I spent 18 years in radio and TV, and I got sucked into the newspaper industry because I was running a radio group in New England, and Guy Gannett Communications asked me to start, remember the Portland, Maine Press Herald before Blethen bought it, to start their online division in '98. And they threw me a lot of money because I was like president of the ad club and all that. And I found it fascinating that in radio and TV, the guy at the top always knew the street. He was always someone that came up through the business side, or at least running that business side. And when I got into the newspaper industry, there were so many publishers I met that had no knowledge of the sales side. But I said, it didn't equate, because you had to know the street in radio and TV. So it's fascinating that you seem to be of that same philosophy. You've got to be part of the interaction on the business side to be a publisher.
Mike, we learned it from radio at Bruner Hagedorn, and we learned it from remember that retail sort manager I told you about? He had no assistant manager that he was working through, and suddenly he put up in his office. And so I thought what I saw happen on newspapers, even the big ones, the publisher would be sitting in his office, had or had not business experience, and many times came up through the newsroom. And he had an ad manager, but it was almost an ad manager name only. And so when the numbers were off, the finger pointing would start. Well, he or she, as Mr. Ad Director, is not doing their job. Well, I wanted the finger pointing back at the top guy. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you're off your numbers, you're the publisher, you have no ad manager, and you're getting paid the big money, and our publishers are paid way beyond what normally they will get paid on other papers.
I checked that out. Your publishers do very well. You give them a very good comp plan. Yeah. You most probably lose very few, I assume.
We don't lose anybody we don't want to lose.
So in other words, there are people begging you for a job right now. I'm not to say that they're unhappy in other companies, because we haven't gotten into that topic in a moment. Before we get into today's newspaper world, let me ask you another question. Since you're so into metrics, are you into the wall of fame, wall of shame concept? Do you do lists in your company where you list the number one publisher, number two, number three, all the way down? Are you one of those or not?
Not yet. It's funny you bring that up. Do you remember Roy Park?
Oh yeah.
Well, I've got an old annual report from Park.
Roy Park. Yeah.
And he came out of radio in Pillsbury and all that, and he was doing the same thing. I have it sitting on my desk out here, and I'm trying to figure out a way to adapt that to our company. He had a lot of fun with it. The number one publisher.
It goes back to whenever you walk into an automotive dealership, there's always a wall behind the sales manager showing every seller on the floor and how many units they have to sell. And even the guy that sweeps the floor in the middle of the night sees this on the wall. Every customer sees it. And no one wants to be at the bottom of a list, if you think about it, right? So it's a philosophy. So if you have those metrics, you could actually, I mean, I know we're here getting into a different topic. There's a way to use that almost as a motivator, but some say it can be a demotivator. All right, so let's fast forward now. Now you are in 2020, and I do not know this for a fact, John, but I'm assuming that you had some chances to sell over the last few years when all the hedge funds were looking and they were starting to suck up properties. Your phone must have been ringing and brokers everywhere were coming after you. You didn't sell, did you? You held on to your assets.
Yes, we did sell out of California because California got to be so difficult.
It is difficult, yes.
Yes, and even some of my senior management couldn't turn it around. We used to make a lot of money there, and it's changed so much. That's the one group we've sold, and that was not for a lot of money by any means. But no, we haven't sold anything else. We don't believe in selling. We buy very carefully, and we don't want to stop the compounding. So if you sell, you got to pay taxes, and the prices are so low now. You know, you got to be buying, not selling. At least papers of our nature.
No one even knows if there is a multiple right now at this point.
Sometimes there's not.
Sometimes there isn't, but there's definitely. But you did not just say the heck with it. You know, this is it. You held on to those properties.
No. I studied the small newspaper business, and keep in mind, I grew up in Chicago, so this was a real rude awakening for me when I moved to the small towns. But I discovered the business model is so much better than the bigger markets and other industries. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like owning the only office building in a town and no one else can build one, you know?
Right.
And so what we saw years ago and studied and tried to convince our brethren of has come true. And there is no other business that I know of that's as good as a small town newspaper business. If you work it. And I'm talking about numbers, of course, but also satisfaction. You know, it's the Mayberry model, so to speak, you know, and Andy Griffith.
Of course. So, okay, then you do get a satisfaction of providing local news to a community. Yeah. I call it you're not just doing this for the money. Do you feel that energy that just, I miss that in some companies right now. Sure. You're providing a public trust to the local community. Do you instill that in your publishers? Is that across your company?
Yes. See, I read their papers, and it's very easy to do now with the replica editions, you know, the editions online. And I will get a hold of one or two of them and comment on something. I try to keep it positive. And it's very, like when we got into the COVID thing, I was a little nervous about publicizing that much in our towns, but then I realized it's a reality to everybody in these small towns. So let's go ahead and do it. And so we got a lot of good work accomplished with that. And that's life-saving in many respects. So
by all means.
I see our business as a service business, nothing more. This is not a watchdog business. This is not a, Pulitzer Prize business. This is not anything but a service business. So if you have that attitude, and most all our editors and publishers have this attitude, we're here to serve, period. Now that doesn't mean if we see a problem somewhere, we'll get on it, type of thing. Usually we'll get on the telephone and not publish it in the paper, because then everybody gets embarrassed. But that's rare, really.
So you're more comfortable making sure that you're covering the chicken suppers, the high school football, what's going on in the town, rather than trying to take down some Politico and investing all your energy. Not that that's not worthy of it, but your job is to be hyper local in your content and provide that to the community. Talk to me then about digital. How did you go down the road of digital services when Gordon Burrell was screaming, the heck with our core competency of generating content, let's build websites, let's manage their social media, let's buy Google display for our advertisers? Where are you in that world of digital services right now?
Well, our business, I mean, very few people even in our business understand it, but our business, I know you do, Mike, because we talk about it. Our business and the value of our businesses in my case, is a habit business, just like liquor and tobacco. So in other words, you know, and our core competencies, if we have them, are built around maintaining that habit. So when Junior grows up, gets married, he's going to take the paper that was in his home, and so forth. So we got into digital carefully and slowly. We noticed that a lot of people were losing a lot of money very quickly, either by, you know, too much equipment, staffing up. And see, there is no habit yet with digital. It takes about 10 to 20 years to build new habits. We learned this in the free newspaper industry when you would start a free paper. After about 10 to 20 years, there was a habit there. And so I think the digital is fine. We do replicas just like the Little Rock, Arkansas paper does, but it's the same product, and we charge for it, and so we haven't disturbed the habit at all. If you tell me, let's say, you know, I'm a smoker, which I'm not, and you tell me all of a sudden that, you know what, you can only smoke 5 days a week, not 7, and on the other 2 days you're gonna take this new, you know, air cigarette or something, I'm going to be pretty mad about it. And I think this is what people don't realize. The real value is there with the habit. So we must take care of the core product, the core competencies. And I don't see any reason why these still can't be, at least at our level size, can't be extremely profitable, different revenue mix a little bit, but that's been that way since the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. You know, when ROP went to preprints, that was a challenge. Classified got a little choppy there for a while. Advo came along. I mean, there's always been challenges.
But you're definitely into the replica edition. In other words,
there is no other way.
You want your staff to build a newspaper, regardless if it's print or digital, as long as that habit is there. And
yes, sir.
And that's what you do. And you charge for. There's no free website in your company, correct? You're charging.
We have a little teaser website, you know, just like our friends in Little Rock do. And sometimes I think we put too much on there, but you know, I haven't seen evidence of it hurting our net paid yet. But we charge, when somebody buys the print subscription, they get the replica for free automatically, or they can buy the replica on its own.
Okay. What about the next level of digital? What about building websites for advertisers? Like I was mentioning, you're not doing any of that. You're not.
Yes, we are doing some of that. In our management styles, we have what's called a loose type organization, like McDonald's was. Mm-hmm. You know, I study it. Most of what I learned outside the newspaper business by studying successful corporations like McDonald's. Some things with McDonald's are standardized from the top and done at the top, and other things are totally local. And so we have a staff that does do websites for customers, things like this. We ever our toe in the water, or more than our toe in the water, it's profitable for us. We don't have the bloated staff doing it, and even some of that stuff will you know, have somebody else do it outside our company. I don't believe, I learned this from some really wealthy business people that sold their companies, then got in another industry and lost all their money. Skill sets are not transferable all the time. Just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're going to be good at another automatically.
Wow.
And so the digital is something we're all learning, and you asked about the staff, the corporate staff size. It for our company, it's about 9 people total, and they do we have no local business offices. Everything's done out of Rochelle. That I learned from Billy Morris years ago. When I heard, we had the same loan officer, and when I heard that he was doing payroll for Juneau, Alaska, out of Georgia,
Augusta, yeah.
I was shocked. Yeah. And I thought, then I find out that in other industries they do this all the time. You know, yeah. Each plant doesn't have their own accounting staff, and so we do that because we want to fill that void for the local customer. Because again, the habit. Now let's talk about the advertising habit. Our advertisers who are readers, that habit with them is they're in the habit of advertising in our papers, and now the replica edition automatically. And so what else can we offer them that's reasonable, that's not going to put us at risk, not going to detract from building the original products. And so we do offer these things, but we don't look to it as a huge profit source. No, but we keep our costs down on it.
You do keep your costs down. You mentioned profitability. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is a good margin now for a community newspaper? Are you comfortable giving us an idea of what is acceptable in today's world?
Well, we're not doing this on every paper right now because of the virus issue.
Of course.
But 30% EBITDA margin, pre-tax,
Wow.
30%. Payroll volume should be 30% or less. This is where a lot of people get in trouble. You know, we see papers, almost every paper we've acquired, the payroll volume's 50%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But 30% is what we shoot for. And we're very big on looking at cash profit, 30% cash profit. In other words, you can accrue advertising, but you better collect it. And so cash profit, and this is the companies I came out of, that's all they operated on. So 30% is our goal. We have some papers over it, notwithstanding the virus, and we have some under that.
Okay. We don't have that much more time together. So let me take you to our current crisis. News deserts, hedge funds. Where do you see the industry in a year or two from now? Do you see it in the exact same place it is now, with the big dogs consolidating and stripping newsrooms? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Where is, if I may be so bold, where is John C. Tompkins today on the future of our industry, sir?
I think it really depends on who the ownership is and who the management is and what's the market. What you have now is the financial guys, you know, aggregating papers and all this sort of thing. We all know what they're doing. And they're short-term players. They're not long-term players. And their managers, in many cases, including them, are professional managers who already have their retirement plan in mind. So they buy papers that are already somewhat run down, usually bigger dailies, and they milk them, and down they go. And they're not going to die on any hill. They're going to move toward retirement. And they'll tell you, I'm retiring in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I'm out of here. And so that's one group of people and managers, and the numbers behind what the hedge funds are doing are absolutely compelling. But there's no regard for the franchise. And at some point, they've almost destroyed the habit locally to a point where it can't be retrieved. So, but then you have another group of people that generally are in the smaller papers who will die on the hill, or they've got a son that will, you know, or a professional management team, which is what we have. And they're going to be just fine. They're going to adapt.
Not to interrupt, when you say die on the hill, you don't mean die, you mean fight, right? Correct?
I mean, you take that hill. This is no World War II, Pacific World War II term. You take that hill or don't come back.
Exactly. So you're saying there are families that believe in the masthead, believe in the institution, believe the fact that they own a 140-year-old trust in the community, and they're going to work that and they're going to maintain that, as opposed to strip its resources, just as you would say, retire. What about the news deserts when the hedge funds are all done with their stripping? Would you be looking at those mastheads that they would still have value, or would you just say they're gone?
No, in some cases, yes, I would, but it's market by market specific.
Okay.
I don't want to name names. I think you and I talked about this before. I could name names and say I wouldn't touch any of those guys' papers. But there are situations where you can buy them, as you know, nowadays pretty inexpensively, and resuscitate them. Now you may have to change frequency, you may have to relaunch, all this kind of thing. And again, what you've done is what they've done is they've taken the habit away, disturbed the habit grossly, and now you got to see if you can rebuild that.
Right.
I have sitting in my living room papers from the 40s. From Rockford, Illinois, and you would not believe the circulation then was 2 or 3 times what it is now. The front page looked like a seed catalog. They're covering who went to dinner with who in a town 25 miles away, and we got to get back to that. And in some markets you can do it if the market is tied enough to with each other, the people in the market know each other and care about their market. So I wouldn't try this in California, for example, along the coast. I wouldn't try it in suburban areas. Nothing wrong with those areas, but the people don't really know each other. Mm-hmm. And so it's like buying radio stations, Mike. You know all about this. You got to be really careful and be specific about what is the market, what's the relation of the radio station to the market. Can I turn this around and can I move it up? Or is this Warren Buffett has an expression, the top manager will not survive a bad industry. And you learn that in the textile business.
Interesting. So what is the future for TMC? NMC? Are you, Not to get personal, do you have offspring that have ink in their veins that will be following you? What do you plan? What is your next step?
Well, I've got three kids, two of which aren't involved in the business at all. My son JD is a marketing director for the company, and he's also a division manager, but he doesn't want to run the company. So certainly not right now. So my plan, I follow the Hearst model, which is, and Hearst, if you think about it, when they were in trouble in the 30s, as you know, they're nearly bankrupt, and they had kids that didn't want to be in the business and all this, and they survived through setting up professional management that with one head, like Frank Bennick was a head at one time, with voting control of the company, the trust and the company stock at one time. And they would decide the dividend distributions, everything else. In fact, if one of the kids protested, they were disowned immediately. And then Frank would have to pick his own successor, and it generally would not be one of the kids. I don't believe in the bloodline thing, really, because what I find is, especially nowadays, many of these kids, if they get into the business, it's out of obligation, and they really rather be doing something else, and why not? You don't want somebody running the business at any level who doesn't want to really be in it.
Of course, but it's a good feeling to know that you're building something that you can pass on to someone else. But you answer to no one, short of your lenders. What I'm saying is there's no corporation, there's not a lot of partners. You built this thing yourself in the 70s, and it's yours. So your plan with that is to hopefully what?
My stock as of this point will go into a trust, and my three kids are the only beneficiaries of the trust. So they would have equity. You got to divide these things up: equity, voting control, things like that. They would have equity, but they wouldn't have, and just financial distribution, but they wouldn't have anything to do with running the business or voting stock or anything like that. That's left to the professional managers that I have now. But the fellow running my company now, day to day, has been with me 31 years. He's 55, so he still wants to work.
That's John Shark, isn't it?
John Shank, yes.
Yeah, John Shank. Excuse me. Yes. I've met him once. You're lucky because he was on your financial side, correct? And now he's
he was a sports editor. Many of our executives that came from the newsroom, most of them were sports editors.
Really?
But sports is competitive, and they measure everything. And one day I went golfing with John, and he was so competitive, I came back and I told his boss, we need to promote this guy. He's so focused and everything. So, but on the other hand, he went into the ad department and he took a free paper we had that was nearly losing money, and he turned it around and he got up to a 30% margin based on advertising, a free newspaper, weekly paper.
Wow.
Almost unheard of.
That's amazing. Well, good. Well, listen, final thoughts. Young entrepreneur today. We've had a number on this program who are now buying newspapers, kids like you. I mean, you were a kid who are seeing value in it. And as we both know, it's a good time to buy. I mean, it really is right now. There's some tremendous value out there. What words of encouragement would you say in the middle of a pandemic, with a very, very rough economy in a polarized country? What words of encouragement would you give those young entrepreneurs now that want to follow in your footsteps?
I would say this is the best time in my lifetime there's been to get in the business by acquisition, not starting the papers, but by acquisition. Starting the papers takes too long. You're starting a new habit a lot, but it's the best possible time. You can get in for far less than I did. The fundamentals are still there. The critical mass, if you buy the right paper, the right town, is still there to build on. The energy that the young people can put into a paper is very exciting to its readers in a small town and advertisers. Now, will this be true 20 years from now? I don't know. I think 10 years from now it still will be in our market sizes. The bigger the market, the sooner that all goes away.
So you're bullish on the industry. You're saying now's a great time to get into it and die on the hill, if I may use your term, correct?
Yeah. I would encourage them to check the revenue stream of the paper they're buying or papers. Just like if you own a shopping center, you'd want to know, you don't want to, some of these stores are out now. You check the revenue stream carefully and make sure you're not buying something where, like we're not that dependent on box stores. We have some inserts, but we're not dependent on them. And so us being interrupted, and This is what I would tell a young person. Be careful, check it carefully, make sure you want to live in that town, and then prepare to work your butt off.
There you go. John, if someone wants to get a hold of you, just to ask your advice or wants to dig a little deeper into something you said, would you share your email address with us, please?
Yes. Right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Tompkins, Tompkins, NMC, @gmail.com.
Thank you very much, John. It was an honor to chat with you today. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks for being an E&P reader. I really do appreciate that as well.
You're doing a wonderful job with E&P. It's just amazing. You're a good example of what you just asked me about. Turning something around that does have a habit.
You and I are very similar because I focused on the business side when I took it over. One of your you spoke highly of was one of my mentors when I did it was a guy by the name of Nick Monaco, who I had Nick advise me during the purchase and show me different ways to make sure I could get value out of it. But yeah, we both, I focused a lot on the business side, and I'm very proud of our turnaround too. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate that compliment. If I may be so bold, stay well. The industry needs you, sir. So I appreciate it.
I'm only 67, so I've got a ways to go.